Hi, this is Professor Favor. So I want to go over a modest proposal, but I want to do a quick lecture so that you have an understanding of what the context is of a modest proposal. Remember, for the English assignment sheet, formal research paper, you have these required sources, and you have an annotated bibliography that is officially due Sunday, but will with an extended date to Monday, the 24th. And so these are the required sources. I'm going to access two of the PowerPoint lectures as well, and just do a quick overview of them. So when we look at, I'm going to go into this tab, presenting proposals, and we look at the idea of the problem solution argument, which is proposal arguments. We understand that when we have a particular problem, that problem must all problems usually should have a solution, right? And that the solution must actually match the problem. So I'm just going to go over a few things here. This is a previous one that I had when we used to have books. And so proposal arguments, which is you creating a you proposing a solution to a problem. Usually recommend action for a particular problem. Action is specific to the future. A lot of times it advise spending of someone's time and money, and somebody should or should not do X, right? And then there are some sample proposal arguments within the PowerPoint. I'm not going to go over them, but characteristics in general, most proposal arguments can be local, specific problems. It can be a global problem. It can be a specific target. And then there are some guidelines. So, how we define a problem has much to do with what kinds of solutions are appropriate, right? And then we have different types of questions that we must ask. And then when we want to know contributing causes, how we define the problem affects what we think are the causes of the problem. And so we go into to different ways and perspectives of examining the causes of the problem. And then proposal arguments need to be developed with an understanding of the processes of government, from college administrations to city governments, right? And then proposal arguments typically ask for change. And that's usually what you will see in most proposals. And but a lot of people don't want change. And so they want to talk about the problem, but they do not want to change. Okay. As then proposal arguments offer solutions that can be realistically accomplished. So you can't have something that's going to take 25 years when you have an immediate 1 to 2 year problem. So you have to understand your problem. Okay. So that's the proposal argument. So let's look at the poverty and population control. And I'm still going to let you read the majority of this, but I want to go over a few things. So I'm skipping ahead. And what we see in a modest proposal, this is what you want to understand: the Irish economy under English rule, right? It's a colonial control plus a financial market crisis. Okay, so mercantilist theory: colony should be governed in the interest of the colonial master. Irish economic life constrained by a range of restrictions which protected English trade agriculture. Acts of Parliament restricted Ireland's capacity to trade either with Europe or with England's other colonies. Conditions of Irish poverty, lack of ready coin, problem of absentee landlords, Protestant, didn't improve the land or conditions for tenants or farmers. Okay, so results for the peasantry: lived on the edge of subsistence, experienced decade of bad harvests, left destitute, starving. Ireland badly affected by stock market crash, and then the economy is fragile, money supply damaged because of payments for stock to the South Sea Company. And then we see with the South Sea Company that there was a stock market crash, market crisis, part of a speculative scheme, which is just a fancier way to say that that someone basically is gambling with your money. And this affected the British investors in 1720. Now, remember, A Modest Proposal is written, or at least published, in 1729. The South Sea bubble was a hoax created by the South Sea Company, founded in 1711 to trade slaves with Spanish America on the assumption that the War of the Spanish Succession would end successfully and would permit the South Sea Company to trade using a treaty. The South Sea Company guaranteed stock with a 6% interest. The Treaty of Utrecht that the company made with Spain in 1713 was less favorable, permitting the South Sea Company to send one ship each year for general trade only. Okay. Then the South Sea Company made its first voyage in 1717. It was great. However, when King George I of Great Britain became the government of the company, this strategy created market confidence, and the company was soon paying 100%. So there's at least a security that, okay, this is a good faith effort, and so we can continue to invest in this company. In 1720, the company proposed to take over the national debt because of the boom in South Sea stock, and that's generally because there was government backing, expecting to recoup expenses through expanding trade. Okay. By September of the same year, the South Sea market had collapsed due to investors unable to purchase the stock and also due to overconfidence. And so that goes back to the previous slide, that they wanted to take over the national debt. So, meaning that they bit off more than they could chew. British investors were ruined. An investigation was opened into the financial crisis, and the inquiry concluded that the three ministers had accepted bribes and speculated. And so then we have individuals who sought out or proposed to seek out those responsible for the scandal. So we have a problem, right? Overconfidence, that is at the sort of root of the problem. Not only just overconfidence, of course, but the people accepting bribes and then speculating, right? And then we have this Robert Walpole, who became the first British prime minister, who promised, and look at and just substitute the word promised for proposed, to seek out those responsible for the scandal. And then, although the South Sea Company survived, it had sold most of its rights to the Spanish government. Let me see if there's anything else. Okay, so that's what I want you to pay attention to when you look at what is going on in A Modest Proposal. This is a company, this is a country that is under colonial rule. Their economic life is restrained or constrained. England is using acts of parliament to keep them from trading with other countries, not only with Europe, but with America, right? Because at this time, America is in effect or whatever. Then there's conditions of Irish poverty, and then landlords who don't even live in the country or expecting a country and its citizens to still be able to pay their rent. And so these are people who are living on the edge of subsistence. They are left destitute, and they are badly affected by the stock market crash, which leaves them economically fragile, money supply damaged, and all of this is due also to overconfidence with the South Sea Company. So pay attention. We're looking at proposal argument, making sure that that we understand the problem in order to create a solution, and then we're also looking at the historical, economic, financial background of A Modest Proposal, of colonial influence on Irish citizenry. Okay, so now let's look at A Modest Proposal. All right, so A Modest Proposal for preventing the children of poor people in Ireland from being a burden on their parents or country and for making them beneficial to the public. This is by Jonathan Swift. Now, this is in the public domain, so that's why you're going to see something like edited and annotated, right, by this individual right here. But this is a public domain type document, right? So remember that this was. Swift was Irish and thought he much preferred living in England. He resented British policies toward the Irish. And this is a letter to Pope of 1729. Imagine a nation Imagine a nation, the two-thirds of whose revenues are spent out of it and who are not permitted to trade with the other third, and where the pride of the women would not suffer, allow them to wear their own manufacturers even when they excel what come from abroad. This is the true state of Ireland in a few words. And this is exactly what this whole thing is about. If you want to really pay attention to what he's trying to say, is like our country is falling. We are under colonial master, and we need to do all that we can. And I'm proposing that the way we get ourselves back on economic and financial track is to eat the children. That's the proposal. Now it's a satire, uh, but that is what he's suggesting. So let's read it. It is a melancholy object to those who walk through this great town or travel in the country when they see the streets, the roads, the cabin doors crowded with beggars of the female sex, followed by three, four, or six children, all in rags and importuning every passenger for an alms. These mothers, instead of being able to work for their honest livelihood, are forced to employ all their time in strolling to beg sustenance for their helpless infants who, as they grow up, either turn thieves for want of work or leave their dear native country to fight for the pretender in Spain or sell themselves to, to the Barbados. So basically, he's talking about these children who are guided by mothers, um, have to go and beg, um, and they also are the type who will turn into thieves and who will betray their own country, right? And so he's outlining the problem, but he's outlining uh, part of the problem. This is not the full problem. So I think it is agreed by all parties that this prodigious number of children in the arms or on the backs or at the heels of their mothers and frequently of their fathers is in the present deplorable state of the kingdom a very additional grievance, and therefore whoever could find a fair, cheap, and easy method of making these children sound and useful members of the Commonwealth would deserve so well of the public as to have its statute set up for a preserve of the nation. So we have one part of the problem. These mothers, instead of being able to work for their honest livelihood, are forced to employ all their time in strolling to beg sustenance for their helpless infants who could grow up, turn thieves, and disloyal. Okay. Then he says, I think it is agreed upon by all parties that this prodigious number of children in the arms or on the backs or on the heels of their mothers, frequently of their fathers, is in the present deplorable state. So when he says present deplorable state, we're talking about the economic issues that are going on with the state as well as the colonial influences. That is an additional grievance. It's not just she has kids, but she has this prodigious number of kids, and doing so within our current economic and financial state, right? So this is a sort of 2 to 3 part problem, and then he's proposing what would the proposal look like. So we need something, whoever could find a fair, cheap, easy method of making these children sound, useful members of the Commonwealth. That is a 3 part proposal: fair, cheap, easy, right? So anyone who counters his proposal, and he will go into it when he calls it a refinement, they must meet this condition: fair, cheap, easy method, right? But my intention is very far from being confined to provide only for the children of professed beggars, meaning that this is their um, also profession. It is of much it is of a much greater extent, and shall take in the whole number of infants at a certain age who are born of parents, in effect, as little able to support them as those who demand our charity in the streets. As to my own part, having turned my thoughts for many years, meaning that he's been researching this, computing this in his head, upon this important subject and maturely weighed the several schemes of other projectors. These are people who are planners, who can also be schemers. I have always found them grossly mistaken in their computation, meaning that however they computed the problem, it doesn't seem like it produced an effective solution. It is true, A child just dropped from his dam may be supported by her milk for a solar year with little other nourishment, at most not above the value of 2 shillings, which the mother may certainly get, or the value in scraps by her lawful occupation of begging. So this professed beggars here is acknowledgement, right? But remember when I noted that that is considered their profession. And it is exactly at 1 year old I propose to provide for them in such a manner as, instead of being a charge upon their parents or the parish, or wanting food and raiment for the rest of their lives, they shall, on the contrary, contribute to the feeding and partly to the clothing of many thousands, right? So this is what we're going to do. We're going to eat the children at a certain age, and then that's how we're going to provide for them. Because remember, this mother here can't work or produce an honest livelihood because she's forced to employ all her time. This is her employment, taking care of her, having to beg sustenance for her helpless infants. And these are the same who would turn as thieves and then also as betrayers. And then these kids are at the heels of their mothers, sometimes their fathers, and that's an additional grievance. And we need to find a way to provide for them a fair, cheap, easy method to make these children sound, make them sound useful members. And the best way that we can do that is to eat the children, is to provide for them, let them contribute to the feeding and partly to the clothing of many thousands. Okay, so that is the solution that he's calling for, with some conditions, a three-part condition. There is likewise another great advantage in my scheme, that it will prevent those voluntary abortions and that horrid practice of women murdering their bastard children. Alas, too frequent among us, sacrificing the poor innocent babes, I doubt more to avoid the expense than the shame, which would move tears and pity to the most savage. So, if you accept my plan, my proposal argument, then it's going to prevent these voluntary abortions. It's going to prevent women feeling necessary to murder their bastard children, and they're only doing so because they are avoiding this expense, right? They don't want to have to take care of those children, right? So the number of souls in this kingdom being usually reckoned 1.5 million, of these I calculate there may be about 200,000 couple whose wives are breeders, from which number I subtract 30,000 couples. So in this paragraph here, he's starting the computation. Remember when he says in line 4 that the other schemes of projectors, I have always found them grossly mistaken in their computation, right? And he'll go through it. So I calculate there may be about 200,000 whose couple whose wives are breeders, from which number I subtract 30,000 couples who are able to maintain their own children. So there's this idea that if you are a wife and you are part of a couple, then you can maintain your own children. Although I apprehend there cannot be so under the present distresses of the kingdom. The present distresses of the kingdom is connected to the present deplorable state of the kingdom. Keep that in mind. But this being granted, there will remain 170,000 breeders. I again subtract 50,000 for those women who miscarry. So they're not going to be part of the computation of children that we eat, or helpless infants that we eat, or those or whose children die by accident or disease within a year. There only remain 120,000 children of poor parents annually born. That's what we're going to work from. That's the number. After all of the computation and all of the rationale for it, prior to this sentence here, we're going to work with 120,000 of poor parents annually born. The question, therefore, is how this number shall be reared, provided for, which, as I have already said, under the present situation of affairs, present distresses of the kingdom, present deplorable state, right? Keep that in mind. They sort of mean the same. Is utterly impossible by all the methods hereto hitherto proposed, for we can neither employ them in handicraft or agriculture. So it's not like we can put the children to work. So I mean, the only thing is that I guess we just have to eat them because we can't make them useful, sound members of society, right? So because we can't put them to work, we can't put them to work to build houses. I mean, in the country, nor can we put them to work to cultivate land. They seldom pick up a livelihood of stealing. So that is the way that they contribute to themselves, and then they do that until at the 6 years at 6 years old, except where they are of torridly parts, impressive abilities. Although I confess they learn the rudiments much earlier, during which time they can, however, be properly looked upon as probationers, and we understand what probationers are. As I have been informed by a principal gentleman in the country of Cavan, who protested to me that he never knew above one or two instances under the age of 6, even in the part of the kingdom so renowned for their quickest proficiency in that art. So, stealing. I am assured by our merchants that a boy or girl before 12 years old is no sellable commodity. So we're getting into stock exchange terms, right? No sellable commodity. So someone right before 12 years old, we can't really sell that person in order to eat that person. And even when they come to this age, they would not yield above 3 pounds or 3 pounds and a half a crown at most on the exchange. And there's that term exchange, which cannot turn to account either to the parents or the kingdom or the charge of nutriments and rags having been at least 4 times that value. So you'll actually lose more money if you try to sell a boy or girl before 12 years old. I should now therefore humbly propose my own thoughts, which I hope not to be liable to the least objection. So I'm expecting when I propose, what I'm about to propose, and give you what I'm about to give you, that you won't object. Okay. So I have been assured by a very knowing American of my acquaintance in London that a young, healthy child, well nursed, is at a year old a most delicious, nourishing, wholesome food, whether stewed, roasted, baked, or boiled, and I make no doubt that it will equally serve in a fricassee or ragu, a stew, right? This is what he's saying, that these are the children who can contribute to the feeding and partly to the clothing of many thousands, since we are economically down. We are under a colonial master. We can't make really our own money. We can't trade with Europe, nor can we trade um, to America, right? And so I guess the only thing that we can do is that when we have visitors, foreigners who come to our country, that we can put the babies on the market and then we can sell them. And then that way we can bring money in. So at a young, healthy child, well nursed, is at a year old. So we're not taking them at the 12-year olds or right before 12, but at a year old, delicious, nourishing, wholesome, stewed, roasted, baked, boiled, fricassee, or ragu. So that it, so that baby is at a very tender age. Um, the um, the skin on the baby is not as thick and tough as it would be if the child was 12 years old, and so it's much easy. It's a sellable commodity. Where did I see that the boy or girl is no sellable commodity? So the contrast is the child nursed is at a year old is a sellable commodity. Okay, and that again, those are your exchange stock market terms. I do therefore humbly offer it to public consideration. Public consideration reminds me of democracy. So remember, if we are under colonial rule as Irish citizens, we want to make choices. We want to make decisions on our own. So let me put this to public consideration so we can vote on it. That of the 120,000 children already computed, that's the number that we are working from. So now he's going to further subtract from that number. 20,000 may be reserved for breed. So that's 120,000. And of that 120,000, 20,000 be reserved for breed. And of that 20,000, whereof only one fourth part to be males, which is more than we allow to sheep, cattle, and swine. And my reason is that the children are seldom fruits of marriage anyway. Well, I'm asking, adding anyway. A circumstance not much regarded by our savages. Therefore, one male will be sufficient to serve four females. So we have to keep this thing going. If we're going to create this new business of eating the children at 1 years old, then we have to continue to create the product. And so that means we're going to have breeders, right? And then if we have breeders, one fourth will continue, males will continue to serve for females, right? That the remaining 100,000 may be at €1 be offered and sold to persons of quality and fortune. These are your high social class people, though the kingdom always advising the mother to let them suck plentifully in the last month, so as to render them plump, fat, good for a table. A child would make two dishes in the entertainment for friends. When the family dines alone, the fore or hind quarter will make a reasonable dish. Seasoned with a little pepper or salt will be very good boiled on the fourth day, especially in winter. So that means we have leftovers. So whatever we do, we can still use this baby as a way to make it throughout the week. I have reckoned upon a medium that a child just born will weigh 12 pounds, and in a solar year, tolerably nurse increase it to 28 pounds. I grant this food would be somewhat dear, and therefore very proper for landlords who, as they have already devoured, most of the parents seem to have the best title to the children. So back in the day, your children could be sold, your house could be sold, sometimes your wife could be sold, you as a husband could be sold, right? If you didn't pay the rent on the land, or you didn't pay the taxes or something like that. And so the landlord could have title to the children in addition to anything else in the house. Infant's flesh will be in season throughout the year, but more plentiful in March, and add a little before and after, for we are told by a grave author and eminent French physician that fish being a prolific diet, there are more children born in Roman Catholic countries about 9 months after Lent than at any other season. Therefore, reckoning a year after Lent, the markets will be more gutted or glutted than usual, because the number of popish infants is at least 3 to 1 in this kingdom, and therefore it would have one other collateral advantage by lessening the number of papists. So if we push our Irish children to the market and sell them, then we can basically wipe out the competition, or potential competition, and those are your papist children, right? Because we don't want the popish here. And then I have already computed the charge of nursing a beggar's child, in which list I reckon all cottagers, laborers, 4/5 of the farmers, to be about 2 shillings per annum. So the charge will be 2 shillings per annum, rags included. I believe no gentleman who would repine to give 10 shillings for the carcass of a good fat child. So it's worth two. We're not going to give more than 10, which, as I have said, will make 4 dishes of excellent nutritive meat when he hath only some particular friend or his own family to dine with. Thus, the squire will learn to be a good landlord, because money will be coming in order for you to pay. So here it is: you are a leaseholder. You already have 4 kids. You breed and you create another, and then you just sell that child, and that child will bring in you an income for you to then also pay your landlord. And so then it makes the landlord look like a good landlord, because nothing worse than owning property and you not being able to collect the rent on the property. That makes you look like a bad landlord, a bad businessman. But accept his if you accept Swift's proposal, then it's going to make the landlord look good. It's also going to make it possible for the parents to be able to pay the landlord. And then he'll grow popular among his tenants. The mother will have 8 shillings net profit and be fit for work till she produces another child. So we are now in the practice and business of breeding and selling. Those who are more thrifty, as I must confess the times require, may flay the carcass, the skin of which, artificially dressed, will make admirable gloves for ladies and summer boots for fine gentlemen. So remember, how can we make them useful? They can contribute to the feeding and partly to the clothing of many thousands. That's how we're going to make them useful. So once we have eaten them and we got the carcass and the skin and artificially dress it, now we can make gloves, right? Like now we have more products. We have the main product, which is the baby. We have workers, which are now they are moving out of the lawful occupation of begging into now breeding, which is a type of occupation for them now. And so then we have sales, we have money circulating, right? And then we have more products that we can create. As to our city of Dublin, Shambles may be appointed for this purpose. So Shambles is meat markets. So now we are moving into a retail system, right? In the most convenient parts of it, and butchers, we may be assured would not be wanting, although I rather recommend buying the children alive and dressing them hot from the knife, as we do roasting pigs. So, again, this is a satire and it's irony, right? But it's interesting, though, that it's so convincing that you wonder just how true it might be. A very worthy person, a true lover of his country, and whose virtues I highly esteem, was lately pleased in discoursing on this matter to offer a refinement upon my scheme. So now this is a counter argument. Remember that with presenting proposals, there's claim, counterclaim, evidence, and rebuttal, right? And so all of what Swift has been doing is presenting his claims on the topic, right? He's presenting reasons why you should adopt his proposal, and then also the advantages, evidence, things like that, right? But now he's getting into the counter argument on the topic, which he is calling a refinement upon my scheme. So he's equating himself to a schemer, like all of the other people are schemers, but he's doing it in an ironic sense. He said that many gentlemen of this kingdom, having of late destroyed their deer, he conceived that the want of venison might be well supplied by the bodies of young lads and maidens. And I'm thinking supplied might mean substitute. Not exceeding 14 years old, nor under 12. So great a number of both sexes in every country being now ready to starve for want of work and service. So these are young lads and maidens who are of age to work and serve, and these to be disposed of by their parents if alive, or otherwise by their nearest relations. So the parents are kicking them out of the house too quickly. But with due deference, so there's that but here. There's a refinement, a counter argument, and now he's countering the counter argument. And then at the end of the proposal, it will be the ultimate rebuttal. But with due deference to so excellent a friend and so deserving a patron, I cannot be altogether in his sentiments. So that's your counter to the counter to that counter here, right? Or his counter. And these to be disposed of by their parents of own them. See, I cannot be altogether in his sentence. For as to the males, my American acquaintance assured me from their frequent experience that their flesh was generally tough and lean. So it's kind of like the person, you got some people who like to eat chicken, right? The baby may have the consistency of chicken, right, in terms of skin. And then those are people who like to have steak. And steak, you can't really cook steak too long because it can be hard. It can become tough and lean. Like that of our schoolboys by continual exercise and their taste disagreeable. So by a certain age, they will be hard to eat, and to fatten them up would not answer the charge. So in other words, Jonathan Swift's proposal is his way of answering the charge of how should we rear them. Where's that information? How should we make them? How should we provide for them in such a manner? So I propose for them in such uh, propose to provide for them in such a manner as, instead of being a charge upon their parents having to take care of them and wanting food and raiment because they're kids and they can't work, that they should contribute to the feeding and partly to the clothing of many thousands. So he's saying that the person's refinement upon his scheme does not answer that charge. It does not answer the problem, right? And so it's not the appropriate solution to the immediate problem, which is we are economically down, we cannot trade, we are under a colonial master, and we need to find a way when these foreigners come to the country to trade money, to bring money into our country, and we need to be at a place where we can begin to make decisions. That's why he uses this term. I offer it to public consideration so that we can become autonomous. That's what we're looking for. That's really what we're trying to do, is become autonomous. Because if a country is financially autonomous, um, then it makes it hard to consistently take them down. So, and to fatten them would not answer. So then, as to the females, I think with humble submission be a loss to the public, because they soon will become breeders. They could become workers themselves now. And besides, it is not improbable that some scrupulous people might be apt to censure such a practice, although indeed very unjustly, as little bordering upon cruelty. So it's more cruel to eat them at 12 to 14 than to eat them at a baby. That's your irony for you, which I confess hath always been with me the strongest objection against any project, how well ever so intended. So yes, it's a interesting counter argument to what he's putting forward, but it's not going to answer the charge. That's why you have to make sure that the solution that you offer actually addresses the problem. Because remember, the solution also has to be fair, cheap, and easy method. It has to be a fair, cheap, and easy method. Okay. Um. So, in order to justify my friend, he confessed that this expedient, and you saw expedient as a term in the civil disobedience, Henry David Thoreau. The expedient was put into his head by the famous Salmanazar, a native of the island Formosa, who came from thence to London above 20 years ago, and in conversation told my friend that in his country, when any young person happened to be put to death, the executioners sold the carcass to persons of quality as a prime dainty, in that in his time the body of a plump girl of 15 who was crucified for an attempt to poison the emperor was sold to his imperial majesty's prime minister of state and other great mandarins of the court in joints from the gibbet at 400 pounds. Neither indeed can I deny that if the same use were made of several plump young girls in this town, who, without one single groat to their fortunes, cannot stir abroad without a chair, and appear at a playhouse and assemblies and foreign fineries, when they never will pay for it, the kingdom would not be the worse. Okay. So take some time to read this information here to make sure you apply it. And then some persons of a desponding spirit are in great concern about that vast number of poor people who are aged, diseased, or maimed, and I have been desired to employ my thoughts what course may be taken to ease the nation of so grievous an encumbrance. So remember that term grievous. Where is it? That the number of children, this prodigious number of children on the arms, the backs, heels of their mothers, is a great additional grievance, right? So then we're using that term to refer to the aged, diseased, and maimed. So now we have a challenge. Not only did we have a refinement to his scheme, was a counter argument, but we also now have a sort of like a challenge to his proposal about what about the other types of poor people? What about the other three categories of poor people? And you got to remember the existing conditions that he created for the proposal: fair, cheap, easy method. Pay attention to that. So then if the aged, diseased, and maimed cannot be useful as a fair, easy, cheap method, then they're not going to be useful. They also would not answer the charge. But there's that but there. I am not in the least pain upon that matter, because it is very well known that they are dying and rotting by cold and in famine and filth and vermin as fast as can be reasonably expected. In other words, there's no need to really provide for them because they're going to die anyway. It's going to be a slow death, but they're going to die anyway. And as to the younger laborers that are now in almost as hopeful a condition, they cannot get work and consequently pine away from want of nourishment to a degree that if at any time they are accidentally hired to common labor, they have not strength to perform it, and thus the country and themselves are happily delivered from these evils to come. So we don't really have a lot of time to solve this problem here. There are just some. It's kind of like our homeless problem today. Sure, we got some policies in play, and we got shelters and things like that. But if you decide to remain homeless 10, 15, 20, 25 years, you have already made the decision to stay in that state. And so we're just going to let you die kind of naturally because you don't want help. You don't want to receive our help. We have housing that we can put you in, and you don't want it. We have vouchers where we can put you in a motel, and you don't want it. So this is the same. It's not necessarily the same, but age, disease, the main already has its consequences, and so there's no sense unless we have medical cures to help these three categories of people. There's no need to really create a proposal for them. So then I have too long digressed, and therefore shall return to my subject. So remember, he never forgot his argument. That's what he's really saying here. Even though he gave you a proposal, then he had a refinement to his scheme, a challenge, a counter argument, and then he countered that counter argument, but with due deference to so excellent a friend and deserving a patron, I cannot be together in all his sentiments. And he gave the reasons why, and that it would not answer the charge. Okay, it would not answer the charge. Um, and then he had another challenge about age, disease, and maim. He's now returning back to his argument. So I have too long digressed, and therefore shall return to my subject. I think the advantages by the proposal which I have made are obvious and many, and as well as of the highest importance. So now he's going to um, give you the advantages. And look at all of the information that he provided prior to that as evidence, not only the computation, the data, the 120,000, all of that as evidence. So for first, I have already observed it would greatly lessen the number of papists. We can get people who would be natural competitors out of the country, with whom we are yearly overrun, being principal breeders of the nation, as well as our most dangerous enemies, and who stay at home on purpose with a design to deliver the kingdom to the pretender, hoping to take their advantage by the absence of so many good Protestants who have chosen rather than to leave their country than stay at home and pay the tithes against their conscience. Secondly, the poor tenants will have something valuable of their own, which by law may be liable to distress, and help pay their landlord's rent, their corn and cattle being already seized, and a money thing or not. So no one really has any money. So the only thing they can do is essentially trade their babies. They don't have corn and cattle, which means they don't have property to sell. They don't have assets. So um, the bearing the baby is something valuable of their own that they can trade. Thirdly, whereas the maintenance of 100,000 children from 2 years old and upwards cannot be computed at less than 10 shillings a piece per annum, the nation stock will be thereby increased 50,000 pounds per annum, besides the profit of a new dish introduced to the table of all gentlemen of fortune in the kingdom who have any refinement in taste. And the money would circulate among ourselves, the goods being entirely of our own growth and manufacture. So we have now a money circulation. So I don't know if you are familiar with the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, you have a major one, and then you have ones per in certain cities. So now we have money circulating around the country. Fourthly, the constant breeders, besides the gain of 8 shillings sterling per annum by the sale of their children, will be rid of the charge. So they don't have to worry about taking care of the child after a certain time. That means they're not having to kick out the 12 to the 14-year old. Fifthly, this food would likewise bring great custom to taverns, where the vintners will certainly be so prudent as to procure the best receipts for dressing it to perfection, and consequently have their houses frequented by fine gentlemen who justly value themselves upon their knowledge in good eating. Skillful cook who understands how to oblige his guests will contrive to make it expensive as they please. So now we have a hospitality system. The I think taverns are like old hotels or something like that. And then we have a chef, we have a restaurant, we have fine people coming in and giving the dishes a good name, right? So now we're trying to bring back our reputation. Sixthly, this will be a great inducement to marriage, which all wise nations have either encouraged by rewards or enforced by laws and penalties. It would increase the care and tenderness of mothers towards their children when they were sure of a settlement for life to the poor babes, provided in some sort by the public to their annual profit instead of expense. We should soon see an honest emulation among the married women, which of them could bring the fattest child to the market. So now we're talking about competition. Men would become as fond of their wives during the time of their pregnancy and as they are now of their mares and fowl, cows and calves, sows when they are ready to farrow, and nor offer to beat or kick them for fear of a miscarriage. So now that we know that we're breeders and we can sell our children um, at a year old, right? The man is not going to do that much to try to beat the wife because that's product now. And product is going to produce some sort of profit. But then the poor women who are selling their children could have competition with the married women. Where's that? Married women who could bring the fattest child to the market. So now we have almost like a subset, right? We have the main market, which is your poor women breeders selling their children at a year old. Now we have a subset. And then remember, those children can also produce the gloves and things like that, right? And then now we have a subset market of married women. And this is essentially if the married woman has already had 4 or 5 kids of her own, in the same way as the poor woman without the father. And she might say, well, after my fifth kid, I want to begin, selling at the sixth. So now we have competition. So we're getting rid of the papists. This will greatly lessen the number of papists so that we can keep competition within our own um, country. Many other advantages might be enumerated. For instance, the addition of some thousand carcasses in our exportation of barreled beef, the um, the propagation of swine's flesh, improvement in the art of making good bacon, so much wanted among us by the great destruction of pigs, too frequent at our tables, which are no way comparable in taste or magnificence to a well grown fat yearling child, which roasted whole will make a considerable figure at a lord's mayor's feast or any other public entertainment. But this and many others I omit of being studious. So he doesn't really have time to get into the advantages of having the yearling child over the barrel beef or the swine or the pig, the swine's fish at the table. So there's competition between types and categories of meat as well. So there's this push. It's no different than a company trying to market. You have 3 different types of sodas: Coke, Pepsi, Sprite, or something like that. And there's this competition of trying to push one um, ahead of the other, right? And trying to make one uh, higher than the other, more of a priority. That's why you'll often see Coke and then the brand messaging Coke with a smile. Because then if you drink a Coke, it's going to add a smile to your life. And so you'll be more concerned about that than you would a Dr. Pepper or a Sprite because you want to smile in life. So, supposing that 1,000 families in this family will be constant customers of infant's flesh, besides others who might have it at merry meetings, particularly at weddings and christenings, I compute that Dublin would take off annually about 20,000 carcasses, and the rest of the kingdom, where probably they will be sold somewhat cheaper, the remaining 80,000. So I can think of no one objection that will possibly be raised against this proposal, unless it should be urged that the number of people will be thereby lessened in the kingdom. So, any objection that you give me, it has to be that that the goal is to lessen the number of people. Right? This I freely own, and it was indeed one principal design in offering it to the world. I desire that the reader will observe that I calculate my remedy. So, where have you heard the term remedy? We usually use the term remedy to refer to a cure. For this one individual kingdom of Ireland, and for no other that ever was, is, or I think ever can be upon earth. Therefore, let no man talk to me of other expedients. I don't want to hear any other expedient. I don't want to hear any other solution that you have to offer. Okay. And so when he goes into this right here, and I would try to open up another window, and hopefully this thing won't stop on me. He's doing a parallipsis. This is a literary term, parallipsis. And parallipsis is the device of giving emphasis by professing to say little or nothing about a subject, as in not to mention their unpaid debts. So it's essentially, I'm not saying that you need to change your mind, but I'm basically saying you need to change your mind. So then when he says, I don't want to talk of any other expense, and I'm not, and he's basically, when he lists off all these different things, I don't want to hear anything about it, but he's saying what he wants to actually hear about. Right. So of taxing our absentees at 5 shillings a pound. So those are your absentee landlords. These are the people, or it could be absentee citizens. These are the people who live in other countries, take their money to other countries, serve there, but still have property in Ireland and won't contribute to Ireland, right? Of using neither cloths nor household furniture except what is of our growth and manufacture. So he's saying that I'm not talking about that we need to develop a manufacturing system by saying I'm talking about we need to develop a manufacturing system of utterly rejecting the materials and instruments that promote foreign luxury. So we need to stop buying Mercedes, BMW. We need to contribute to our home country products, right? Of curing the expensiveness of pride, vanity, idleness, and gaming in our women. So they need to stop doing that. Of introducing a vein of parsimony, prudence, temperance. So we need to become more prudent and temperate. We need to learn to love our country and the inhabitants of quitting our animosities. We need to quit animosities, factions, right? Nor act any longer like the Jews who were murdering one another at the very moment their city was taken. We need to be a little more cautious, not to sell our country and consciences for nothing. So again, if you take this in, if you convert this into this parallipsis here, all of this parallipsis here into declarative statements, is saying what we need to do going forward. Teaching landlords to have at least one degree of mercy towards their tenants, putting a spirit of honesty, industry, skill into our shopkeepers, um, and don't cheat, don't exact upon the price, measure goodness, be fair, etc. Right. So this is what you call parallipses, parallipsis, and it's essentially saying I'm not saying that you need to change your clothes because that dress doesn't look good on you, but I'm really saying that you need to change your clothes because that dress does not look good on you. That's what that really means. Therefore, I repeat, let no man talk to me of these and the like expedients, till he had a glimpse of hope that there will ever be some hearty, sincere attempt to put them into practice. So, I this proposal to eat the children um, is one that I came up with because no one listened to me when I was trying to get them to see this. That's essentially what he's saying. Swift is saying, I tried to tell you all these different things. I tried to propose these different things. You rejected it. So this proposal to eat the children is the one that I came up with as a result. Okay. But as to myself, having been wearied out for many years with offered vain, idle, visionary thoughts, and at length utterly despairing of success, I fortunately fell upon this proposal, which, as it is wholly new, so it has something solid and real, of no expense, a little trouble, full in our own power. So there's that power dynamics. Let's take our power back, and whereby we can incur no danger in disobliging England. So it's not like we are trying to buck up to the colonial system. We're trying to do what we need to do within a country to make sure that we are, financially whole. But this kind of commodity, and the reason why we're not going to dishonor England or upset England, upset is a better word there, because we don't have to export it. This flesh being of too tender a consistence to admit a long continuance in salt, although perhaps I could name a country which would be glad to eat us up. We can is We're going to trade when we have foreigners come to the country, essentially. So we don't even have to send this out. We don't even have to export it because England is already keeping us from exporting to make money to bring back into the country anyway. But when we do have people who come to the country, and these are the people they go back to the references to fine gentlemen, gentlemen of fine repute. I can't find it right now. But anyone, these people who can bring us a good name, right? All right, last paragraph. After all, I am not so violently bent upon my own opinion as to reject any offer proposed by wise men, which shall be found equally innocent, cheap, easy, effectual. So anyone who comes up with a refinement on his scheme again, that person still has to meet the main where is it? The main category is fair, cheap, and easy. And if he does, remember, this is the person who would deserve a statue because he will be considered a preserver of the nation, right? So then you have to see Swift considering himself as the one who has come up with a fair, easy, cheap method, and he is suggesting that he should get the statue because his fair, easy, cheap method is a preserver of the nation. So anyone who does that is considered wise, and that person brings about an innocent, cheap, easy, effectual. But before something of that kind shall be advanced in contradiction to my scheme, another counter argument, right? And offering a better, I desire the author or authors will be pleased materially to consider 2 points before you do that, right? So first, as things now stand, how they will be able to find food and raiment for 100,000 useless mouths and backs. So how are we going to provide for them? How are we going to rear them? Secondly, there being around million of creatures in human figure throughout this kingdom, whose whole subsistence put into a common stock would leave them in debt 2 millions of pounds of sterling, adding to those who are beggars by profession to the bulk of farmers, cottagers, laborers with their wives and children, who are beggars in effect. I desire those politicians who dislike my overture and may perhaps be so bold to attempt an answer, because remember, this solution is an answer, that they will ask the parents of these mortals whether they would not at this day think it is a great happiness to have been sold for food at a year old in the manner I prescribe. See, there's nothing worse than being poor and then still having landlords and tax people come after you because of your debts. And I prescribe, therefore, having I thereby have avoided such a perpetual scene of misfortunes as they have since gone through, the oppression of landlords, the impossibility of paying rent without money or trade, the want of common sustenance with neither house nor clothes to cover them from inclemencies of weather, and the most inevitable prospect of entailing the like greater miseries upon their breed forever. So I profess in the sincerity of my heart that I have not the least personal interest. So I'm, I'm not going to get paid for this, right? I the least personal interest in endeavoring to promote this necessary work. So he's calling it a necessary work, having no other motive than the public good of my country by advancing our trade. That's our goal. Providing for infants, relieving the poor, giving some pleasure to the rich. So that fair, easy, cheap method is going to do those four things. I have no children. This is the irony also. I have no children by which I can propose to get a single penny, the youngest being 9 years old, and my wife past childbearing. Okay. So this is a quick read. Take some time to read all of this other information um, as you go through this, because I'm going to bring in a copy. But this is a read of a modest proposal, and I'm going to stop right here.